All right, welcome back to Sexy Biz Babe podcast. I'm so excited. I have Dr. Kat on today, and she is actually, I'll have you introduce yourself, but I know she helps with ketamine therapy, and she is a sex therapist. So go ahead and introduce yourself to my audience.
Yeah, so I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I work with sexuality, trauma, and psychedelics. I'm one of the leading voices in the field of sex and psychedelics. I'm also the founder of sexloveyoga.com, which is an online platform for everything around sexuality and embodiment and, developing the relationship with our sex lives.
Ooh,
And
yes.
and I am also the host of Sex Love Psychedelics podcast.
Ooh, okay. So I actually met you at a Goddess Day, and she was hosting a workshop. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was a few years ago. And then I got to meet you in person at like a
Play party
meetup event. So it was more like meet and greet, like get to know each other at one of our friends. But yeah, so it's really cool to connect on different levels. And I remember I enjoyed your workshop. I can't remember what it was about completely.
I think we were twerking. I think that's exactly what we were doing. Yes.
Perfect. Well, that is definitely what I do. So no wonder I loved it. And I was like, oh, I have to connect with you. And then I listened to your audio porn podcast, which is called, what is it called?
Erotically Wasted.
Okay, which is so sexy. I think I listened to just a couple, and I sent one to my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, ooh, her voice is so sexy. And like, yeah, that was great. That was hot.
I had started that, I think, around pandemic time as a tool to get into my own, like, turn myself on.
Ooh.
So I started out with writing erotic stories and writing erotic poetry. And I would do it everywhere. I would go to cafes. I would do it when I was flying in the airplane. And I could feel the palpable energy inside of me. I was like, oh my God, this is such a great tool for turn on. And then I started recording them because I was already recording meditations because I've been teaching yoga for several years at that point. And so this was just another way of me dropping into this like meditative low voice delivery of these stories, and I loved it.
Ooh.
It's just it's such a reminder to think about how art can, any way that we can nourish our eroticism, because it's something that needs to be fed, right?
Ooh,
it's not something that's like a light switch that we can just turn on and be like, oh, now I'm turned on, most people aren't like that. So how are we feeding it? And so erotic stories became that for me.
Ooh, I love that. And I love that you touched on this right away. Is a lot of people just think that, at the beginning of a relationship, you're just like hot and steamy and bothered and ready to fuck. And then over time, you're like, oh, we lost the passion. No, you have to nurture the passion.
Yeah.
Especially, I moved in with my boyfriend, and we have to set like pleasure dates and like go do new experiences or try something new or get out and go to like a party or environment, and it spikes it back between both of us. Like, even if we go to a play party, we come back home and have a different erotic energy towards each other. And so it's very important. And no, you don't have to do play parties, but going out, going on a date, trying something new, like getting out of the house. What are some of your best tips to nurture that?
Well, and this is important because it's the concept of erotic intelligence. So I'm going to introduce a word, helps us to remember that the relationship that we have around our sexuality and our bodies is ever growing as much as we want to live into the curiosity of it and live into the feeding of it. So erotic intelligence is this concept of, again, the relationship we have with the world, the eroticism of the world, the relationship with our bodies, the relationship with our own internal landscape, our mind, our psyche, our emotions, the intelligence of other people's emotions, the creativity. And if we think of these 5 dimensions as different ways that we can take care of our erotic intelligence, then the higher erotic intelligence that we have, then the more amplified of energy and vibrancy and aliveness that we get. And if any of these one dimensions are decreased or like they're lacking in our attention and care, then we'll feel the depletion of it. So sex and eroticism can be a renewable energy. You get so many people who, like you said, they're like, oh, we lost our passion, or I'm too tired, or they're not motivated for sex. But if we look at one of those 5 dimensions, we can see, well, what might need my attention. So that creativity and that novelty is really important. Here's where we can expand the definition of what sex is. It's not just this heteronormative idea of penetration and sex, and like friction and rubbing bodies together and just, just naturally having this sexual appetite. It's like, how do we create adventure out of our sex life? How do we take a kitchen spatula and turn it into a pervertible and now it's a spanking tool? Or how do we make how do we dress ourselves up to inspire, whether it's a role play or another archetype of ourselves, or something that just like changes the mundanity of our day into something that's a little spicier. Before I came over here, I was sending voice notes of very hot, sexy scenes of to a specific lover, and it's enlivening. It's like you can literally feel the buzz in your body because you're allowing the creativity to flow. And that's the same as like life energy and nervous system energy. It's like all this palpable, like, passion in the body. Yeah.
And this is why you need to prioritize pleasure and put pleasure first, is because then you get in that creative energy and then you get motivated and then you're knocking off your to-do list faster than you would have if you didn't prioritize it.
And even pleasure is, let's get a little nerdy for a second, because when we're focusing on pleasure, we actually strengthen your nervous system's capacity to hold higher amounts of energy. So it actually benefits us on a physiological level. If we are taking our time to savor our morning cup of coffee or tea, or we're relishing in poetry, or we are being really present to curling up and spooning our partner or wiggling our butt in the spooning, I
was like picturing it. I was like, oh, I love that. I do that in the mornings. It makes me happy.
Right. Yeah. But when you are bringing your conscious awareness to this, even just for a moment, we call it a glimmer in psychology. And a glimmer helps to regulate your nervous system. It helps you to access a space of safety and vagus nerve regulation in this calm state of being. Now, when you hold on to that glimmer and you hold on to that pleasure for a little bit longer, it turns into a glow. And what happens in your body is your nervous system will feel that. You feel an expansion in your body. So as much as our culture has trained us to low prioritize pleasure, it is literally for our health and our well-being, to make sure that we're infusing it in our life, not just making decisions based on what's logical or rational, but on what just fucking feels good.
I love the psychology behind it because I've been taught to feel longer. Like, example, eating an apricot or a peach and really devouring it and tasting it and letting it like dribble down your mouth and just like kind of enjoying it and just basking in it. Maybe it's the smell, it's the taste, it's the feeling of it, and just opening up to it longer. And it helps you open up to those experiences in the bedroom and then in life. But then you broke it down in like psychology as well. I was like, ooh, this is juicy. I'm really getting tingly.
I mean, you could just slip the nerd in there, right? Yeah. There. Just like slip it in there.
I love it. Yeah, slip the nerd in there. I like nerds. I like it. Nerding out is great. Awesome. What's one of yours that you like to kind of take in and elongate it?
Oh, that's such a good question. One that I do on an everyday basis, and then this might feel really simple to most people, but I leave my windows open when I'm doing work because a lot of times I'm on the laptop seeing clients. And I have birds I live in the mountains.
Yeah.
So it's all the sounds of the birds. And it's so easy for me to just stop and drop into the sounds of the birds.
Aww.
And they're so cheerful. And it instantly gives me this warm, expansive feeling. So even though I'm so directly focused on this laptop screen all day, it tuning into that helps me to come out of that contracted state. Or that hyper-focused state. So that one's one of my favorite ones, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute. Yeah. You should, like, if you ever leave, like, record them and take it with you just to bring you back home. Like, if you
so
want to miss home.
I love that. Yes.
That was my first thought. So, I don't know. I just wanted to share. I love that.
Yeah. And something more erotic, I would say, so I love erotic poetry. Like, love it.
Yeah.
And hence why I write it. But I have, this is one of my favorite things to luxuriate with lovers too. So in the mornings, it's part of my ritual to read a poem out of a book, any book, and just relish in the words and just feel the words because poetry is so evocative of imagery and feeling. And so I love to read them. But then even more, I love to leave voice notes for lovers of reading these poems. And just like, just a little, just slip it in there and let them relish in it. But also it's like, to get nerdy again, it's also the sensation of my voice in my throat. Because sound vibration can also bring up a lot of pleasure. And it can, and I'm sure you've talked about this on your podcast, but how sound can amplify orgasms.
Oh, no, yes. Please cover this. I was about to ask you, like, how letting out the sound. Okay, wait. I want to share something real quick before we dive into that. I used to, this is a long time ago, Tia. This is a long, like, before I was open and free and felt a little bit more healed towards men and all the things. I used to not want to give validation to men because I felt like they could do better. And so I wouldn't want to give too much validation because then they would think they were doing too good and that they would stop. Or that it would, yes, I know, this is an old version of Tia, but
So what was validation? So
like
give me an example.
Moaning. Because men used to tell me, oh, you came, didn't you? And I'm like, no. Like, just because I was like, feeling into it and making sounds, they would just assume that I got off and then like leave me. So that was the old wounded version. So I would not want to give too much validation because then they would just assume that. Anyways, when I started getting more into the vocal and just really feeling into it and letting it out, I would get more turned on and it like leads to the orgasm. So I'd love for you to break that down or tell us more.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to even think about that because to speak to what you just shared, like what a great example of how so many people project onto the other person versus actually attune to them. Like if they were actually present to you, they probably would have seen you a little more contracted or maybe your eye gaze looking somewhere else. But because so many people have these challenges around sex, they have shame or they don't want to be a bad lover. They can project onto the other person either what they think, what they want the other person to be experiencing or what they think that they should be experiencing or what might match them being a good lover. But they're not interpreting it correctly because they're not attuning, which would require presence, which would require them to see what's going on. So, and with that, there's also this experience called... And I'm taking you into layers. Like, I'm taking you into it. Okay, we're dissecting this. Let's go. Dissect me. So there's this phenomenon called the pleasure loop, the pleasure feedback loop, that when one person is showing their pleasure and their enjoyment, and they are finding their way to be in enjoyment of this. And I'm initially imagining when you're going down on somebody. Right? Because that's one of those ones where we might unconsciously caretake for the other person because we're afraid that they're bored, that we're taking too long, that they're not enjoying it, that they can't possibly be enjoying it, right? And we project that onto them. And then we're much quicker to be like, oh, stop. Okay. You know, like I'm done, or no, don't worry about me, or no, I want to get back into the giving position, right? But when your partner is visibly and audibly expressing their pleasure, you don't have to caretake for them. And it's easier for you to drop into your pleasure because they're good. And you can tell they're good.
And enjoy it.
Right. So it actually creates a feedback loop here where everybody is in their own responsibility of their own individual pleasure experience. And then everybody can let go of trying to caretake or trying to function for the other person. And they can trust that there's communication happening if something does need to shift. But there's a really cool, I think that's just really important, especially when we consider in these roles of giving and receiving. And
that's why it's so important to drop in and enjoy doing it and receiving. Both. Everybody.
and to find how you can enjoy it. Because if you're not enjoying it, then you got to figure out something else so you can enjoy it. Like if your neck is cramping, take care of yourself. You know, it's like if you have a difficult time with the way something is feeling, adjust yourself. You know, or get some sort of prop, or ask for something from your partner, you know, or ask for something to change. Like it's just an important part of that feedback loop.
All right. If you like this episode and you want to go deeper into your pleasure and learn how to have the best sex of your life, go check out my freebie, 5 Steps to Mind-Blowing O's. And you will learn 5 ways to improve your sex life, whether you're just having great sex, mediocre sex, or you're not really having sex at all. This is for you to take it to the next level, and I promise you'll learn something new.
So that's communication. And then the sound here. So sound in your own body, you know, here's how you communicate to the other person. So when you're considering sound in your own body, making a vocal sound will also activate the vagus nerve that runs right down through your throat and all the way down, and then branches out into your gut. So this whole vibration can both break up stagnancy, it can activate and move energy, it can also stimulate your cervix. And simulate your genitals, so it can amplify your potential for orgasms, both genitally and throughout your entire body.
Okay, I have a question.
Great.
So so I recently found out that this is very open, but I recently found out I love deep throating, and I love just gagging on the dick, and it makes me orgasm now.
Yes.
And I'm like, is that linked? Because I'm like, I never, ever, also I love my partner, and I haven't really been able to do that with other people, but just that like surrender for one. So I'm very into submissive roles and like just letting go. So that also I think is big. And then just like really letting go. And then also it's like very deep in my throat. So I'm like, oh, that might be a component. And then also just, I do feel like love and safe.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is contributing to orgasm, and that's the thing, is that so many of us have defined orgasm as something that's clitoral or something that's intervaginal, but we have so many nerve endings in our body, and we also have a potential for so many different experience of orgasm. So like a full body orgasm is like it can be shivers and shimmers in the body. It can be vibration. Shaking. It can be subtle energy bodies, you know, and it can be large and like earthquake, and all kinds of things. But they can also show up in our throat, and they can show up in our mind, and they can be as mindgasms, if you've ever heard of that or experienced that. But it's even in some of the tantric practices, we learn about how like having an orgasm in your inner elbow or on your
Oh.
finger. You
Like
know,
it's just isolated right there?
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It can be, or it can amplify through the body, you know, using some of these tools of sound, using movement, using touch, using vibration in the body, using breath. You know, all of these are tools that we can use in our body to manipulate and activate and move energy or orgasm in the body. So I love this. And it's the surrender piece of that I really want to highlight, because when you can let go, energy can flow. Energy can flow. And then if we're thinking about genital contractions of orgasms, if you're tense or tight or holding, you can't have that contraction.
Key component, ladies, is letting go.
And opening the body.
Yeah. And I like to sometimes visualize a flower or a rose and kind of like opening, like visualize it opening. So when you start getting that tighten, you're like, I'm gonna have orgasm.
Squeeze it out.
Squeeze. No, do the opposite. Like, let go, open up. And that's when you can have like multiple orgasms, full body orgasms. And that's how I actually have full body orgasms in that moment. It like goes through my whole body.
Yeah.
It's not like in my throat. It's just like, I don't know. It's just all throughout.
I get it.
It's amazing.
It's all throughout, and it's around, and it's like,
pulsating. It's fabulous. It's like one of my favorite orgasms. So it's a new thing that I've learned to experience. And it's through exploration and being with a partner that I trust fully.
Yeah. And you know, some of the best sex that I have is when I'm doing regular practices of yoga.
Ooh, okay.
Because it opens my body. It opens what's called the fascia in the body, which is the connective tissues. And when that's open and more liquid versus being more tight, rigid, you know, hard, energy can flow through that.
Okay, so I teach flexibility and splits classes.
Great.
And I help women get splits in like 2 months. So that also helps probably me. I'm very flexible. I do pole dancing. I'm like, oh, okay, that's helpful. And I've had some of my ladies come to me and be like, oh yeah, and sex is a lot better now. It's easier. I'm more limber.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. And now it's also good for orgasm.
Yes.
Now you know. Awesome. Okay, so let's dive into the psychedelic world. First of all, how did you get into this? And how did you start relating it to sex and helpful in sex? I have found some really cool ketamine has really helped me drop into my body, get out of my mind. And that's how I've learned to surrender deeper and deep throat deeper and really be in this like slower, intentional, mindful, I don't know, just feeling every moment was through ketamine. So I'd love if you could share more about how you got into it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my background just in my life, I have childhood sexual trauma, a young adult sexual trauma, and I really struggled around sexuality. I really struggled with being in my body. And that's what inspired me to become a sex therapist when I was 23. I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to school for this. Let's go.
Very cool.
And and I would say I was about 26 when I went to my first ayahuasca ceremony.
Okay.
And then got into ceremonial medicine work. And I felt these experiences of energy moving through my body and of my body surrendering and having full-blown energy orgasms moving through my body and rolling through my body. And I also was able to access these reference point of actually what surrender was, because before that it was a concept to me, you know, this idea of like, just surrender, just let go. And it's like, okay, I'm doing it.
I'm letting go. I'm trying so hard.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not it. That is not it. And in those states, you either surrender or you deal with a lot of nausea or pain or distress in your mind or in your body. And so being able to touch on the physical experience of what surrender was outside of this intellectual concept of it was. Same thing with self-love. Like I felt what self-love actually was supposed to feel like in my body versus this idea. Or around the boundaries between me and the world, you know, and the loss of boundaries between me and the world. And to be able to see that I really wasn't living inside my body. I was always living in this slightly dissociated, slightly dysregulated state all the time.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, in the physical sense, I learned so much of this and energy. And as a sex therapist and as a, you know, I was teaching yoga at that time too, being able to see a whole new layer of healing that made all of these things connect more easily. And so my work today is I work with ketamine assisted therapy, work with everyone, couples, individuals, all genders, and the ketamine both acts as this tool to be able to soften the body. And so that's like, even with my very anxious clients or clients who've experienced trauma, they're able to experience states of safety that they've never experienced before.
Yeah.
And to be able to have that as a reference point to then go back to is huge.
Yes. You can use it as a reference point. Like, now that I know how it feels, I can do it sober.
Right.
Like,
well, then
I can tap into it. And I've done it both ways, but now I can bring it back and feel into it without taking it.
Yes. Yes. You know where you're going. It's kind of like what I said with the self-love. I had never quite understood self-love. I was teaching it as this intellectual idea, like just love yourself, right? And we see that a lot on Instagram. But the first time that I like looked in the mirror in the bathroom at an ayahuasca ceremony, and I just fell in love with myself, and I sat in there for, oh God, probably way too long, just like really reveling in my beauty and my like how adorable I was.
You are
and
adorable.
Like, thank you.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it was, oh, that's what self-love is. I haven't been doing it.
Yes.
So now I can come back to this. And that's what the whole idea around integration is, and the importance of integration. Like, we can experience states of love with MDMA. We can experience altered states of reality. We can experience the opening of our body, the looseness, the pleasure in our body. MDMA is really good for that. And so is ketamine, actually.
Yeah.
But so for my clients who struggled with painful penetration, or my clients who've struggled with accessing pleasure in their body because it's never been a safe place for them to be in, especially with my clients who might be going through transitions, they've never felt safe in their body. And so to be able to touch on that is massive. We take it for granted.
Yeah.
And but to be able to access that then gives you so much space to be able to work with these more challenging memories, or to be able to invoke safety in sex so your body can let go and to experience the pleasure, the arousal, the orgasm.
Yeah.
And then in some of these states, like when I'm working with ketamine with clients, it's like they can go into this space, create safety, create softness, create spaciousness inside, and now they can sit with the hard emotion, the hard memory. Their vulnerability is more easily accessed. They might, if I'm working with a couple, they might talk more about some of these challenging topics that they're experiencing in their relationship a lot more fluidly. Sex is oftentimes one of the most challenging topics to have a conversation with your partner. And so here it loosens a lot of that up so people can talk about their shames and their fears.
Just without as much anxiety. Yeah, I do notice that. You kind of feel a little bit more spaciousness in your brain.
Yeah.
You feel more at ease. One of the time I had prescription, and just at a play party, I was very stressed. I was having a long day. I was more at work because I did a workshop, so I wasn't like as open and letting go. And I had a little bit of prescription ketamine, and I just felt like my best self. I was like, I don't even feel high. I just feel less stressed, less anxiety, and just happy. And I started like dancing in this beautiful pool in a mansion, just naked, like just dancing. And I was like, oh, I miss doing this.
Yeah. It can really help us to feel, it lifts the heaviness of depression. It lifts the heaviness of anxiety so that we can actually feel, again, like safe, good. Yeah. And so in that, when you add the conscious awareness to it or the therapy to it, it helps us to be able to shift and change those core belief systems that might otherwise be hard to change on a regular basis. So you can start out with more of a pliable neural network that you can change these thoughts, change the, with positive affirmations or with conscious awareness, especially for the next week to a couple weeks. And so it's not just the time period that you're using these medicines, but it's for an extended period of time after that where you can make those lasting changes. And I think that that's really important to have those types of conversations with people so that they can get the most benefit out of these beautiful medicines when used with conscious awareness.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you recommend, or wait, I don't want to say recommend, but I feel like it also works when you can do it recreationally. Like I've been able to, I would love to do a ketamine therapy though, but I've been able to kind of like enjoy it and go through these experiences, take note of it and watch the shifts.
Yeah. But that's the thing. You're adding conscious awareness to it. You're taking note of what's happening, of what this is like. So the difference between people doing MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, and having sex, you can have a great fucking time. And if you turn this into journaling about it, taking note of what that felt like, what you experienced, what came out of yourself, what you expressed to your partner, even the way that you followed sex, which is often more not so linear towards the goal of orgasm, but more like pleasure focused. Yeah. Where you're like, oh, this feels good. Let's do this and let's follow this. Yeah. And like, my dick's just not hard. It. But like, that's fine. But I'm just enjoying it. Great. Exactly.
Your dick doesn't have to be hard.
Dick don't have to be hard. So it's, it redefines this because we're like, oh, this is what's happening and it still feels good. Or this is what I'm experiencing. This is telling my partner about this shame and my partner's receiving it. They don't feel that that's a threat. And it just, now you can apply that to your life outside. And that application, that integration is what will change your sex life moving forward. So again, a really hot, sexy time with your partner and a psychedelic versus actually changing your sex life.
Yeah, taking note, enjoying it, seeing what's different. How do you feel? Yeah, I definitely took some mental notes on that, and I just kind of incorporated those into my future. And it's been very helpful, just very helpful. Okay, so you talk about not being defensive when talking about sex. I have a question about when a guy or a partner gets uncomfortable with their partner having a vibrator, where they're like, oh, I don't satisfy you. Or it could be in the reverse. So we can touch on both. Where the man is like having a regular amount of porn. Okay, I'm just going to say he's not addictive. It's not coming in between his work. It's not coming in between him and his kids. It's, let's just call it an amount that does not affect his life in a negative way. And they get really insecure and then they want to control it or not allow it. They
want to not allow the
vibrator or porn. So it goes for both. So we can cover one at a time. I'm so ADHD. I'm like, do. Let's do both.
Yeah, let's double team it.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So
maybe the woman's one first is like where they get really insecure about a woman having a vibrator.
Yeah. And I think this comes down to, there's a few different things here. There's the cultural conditioning of pressure on each of us to be the best lovers. And that if we aren't, again, this is the culturally constructed idea of what sex is, that I'm responsible of getting you off. That I'm responsible for your orgasm, your pleasure, your good time. And that enmeshes us into these roles that we actually can't fulfill for our partner. So when I'm working with couples, differentiating them as two individuals with two different bodies, two different needs, two different thresholds, two different turn-ons, or more turn-ons. Two different stories around sex. It's not beneficial, and it's not actually effective to be the person that's functioning for the other person or trying to get them off. So deep throating. I just
yes,
Sore
from deep throating.
I know. Okay.
Yeah.
It's starting to clear up. Like you deep throat once, and now it's clearing up.
I woke up one day and I was like, oh my god, I feel like I'm getting sick again. I'm like, my throat hurts, and I'm like, but I don't feel sick in any other way. And my boyfriend's like, maybe it's from last night. I was like, oh, duh.
Yeah. So back. So back to this. So I think part of it is, recognizing that aspect, the cultural pressure that we all have. But then it's also, as the person who's holding the vibrator, you can also get curious with the other person and say, oh, what's coming up for you? Non-defensively. But curiosity is more of being focused on the process to understand the experience of the other person. Yeah. Like, what does that feel like for you when I pull out the vibrator? What does that mean for you? Like, how have you understood vibrators to mean? Have you ever played with a vibrator? Would you be open to experimenting with the vibrator? So now it's shifting the narrative around it, and it's creating an invitation. Would you be open to experimenting with me? Would you be open to playing with me? Would you open to feeling this? Here, put it on your dick. See if that feels good. Like, notice what it is. So
playful and enjoyment. Yeah, I've had clients in the past where the guy was just like, oh, well, one of my exes just relied so heavily on it, and then she would just prefer the vibrator. And so he was making his past mean the future. And it's like he was just such a hard no.
And the curiosity helps us to understand where these are coming from. Because if somebody has a reaction, then that's coming from something in their past or messaging that they've picked up somewhere, and there can be validity there.
Yeah.
The thing that breaks a lot of these types of conversations is when somebody hears that story and then they tell them why they're wrong instead of recognizing why they're right. Not right as in I agree with you, but right as in because of what you've experienced in your life, that makes sense. And so that is a healing moment. That is an intimacy building moment, and it removes the defensiveness, which defensiveness is just us getting stuck in I need you to see where I'm coming from. I need you to understand my good intentions. I need you. But that gets us stuck in this back and forth fighting.
Yeah.
But if instead we take the brave role and we first step into the curiosity and work hard to understand their whole worldview around this, and then we can even bring in an invitation and say, would you be open to hearing about what that was like for me? Or sometimes I'll say this, I'll say, oh, wow, that totally did not translate to me what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And that is a very non-defensive way to make connection rather than try to make somebody see something or understand something.
Yeah. Key components to good communication and relationships.
Yeah.
And it saddens me when partners, people getting married, can't even have these talks about sex. They just avoid it, which often leads to lack of sex, avoidance of sex, or the people pleasing of just giving or trying to please their other partner, but they're not really in it, and they can both feel that, and it's going to affect both partners' relationship and happiness.
And it's hard because most people aren't given the skills of how to communicate.
Yeah.
They don't know how to be curious, or they don't know that if their partner expresses a fantasy, that there's a whole spectrum of, it can just be a fantasy. It can just be something that we talk in the bedroom about, all the way to the spectrum of actually living that out into reality. So it's like, oh, my partner told me this thing now that they want to have a threesome. But that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
They might want to tell erotic stories about a threesome in the bedroom, but never want to bring it into reality, because they're like, in reality, it's not as good as the perfect fantasy of my life, you know? So it's like, a lot of this is communication skills. Like, why do we avoid? Because we've said something that was authentic to us and it didn't land because we didn't have the right skill to, or the other person didn't have the skill to hold space, or to even have self-inquiry to understand that their reaction is from something of their past, or they're misinterpreting or they're mistranslating what their partner is sharing.
Yeah.
So that's usually where I see it fall apart. And the same with porn. You know, if both people could step into the curious role to see, what does porn mean for somebody? What are they getting out of that experience? What would they like the relationship with the porn to look like? And then on the flip side, you know, as a woman, how is the porn impacting my partner's knowing how to touch or move my body? You know, I've worked with couples where I'm not against porn myself. It just is. I have seen in some relationships where the partner, the only type of porn that they watched was porn that perpetuated this one way of how the woman's body was entered or treated, and
then he would do that in real life.
Yeah, and it didn't translate to her body.
Yeah,
and so
this porn shows that it works.
Yeah. Or they were so they you know, this contributes to our mind's understanding of porn. Like anything we consume, it becomes a part of our repertoire, becomes a part of like our lens. And so what he was turning him on was really rough, and it wasn't that she was opposed to it. It was that her body needed something else before it would open
build
to
up.
that. Right.
Some foreplay, some building up the pleasure and opening up. We expand. I don't know if you know the stats on this, but our clitoris expands and blows up like.
Oh, mine blows up.
Yeah, it's like very big, and that's why we feel much tighter or wet when we're more turned on, and it's more pleasurable for both of us. Like, me and my partner had sex recently, and I was not fully ready, but I was like, yeah, you know, he's my partner. And then he could instantly kind of tell I wasn't really into it, because he's very
attuned.
In tune. Yes.
I love that.
And he was like, oh, we started a little too early. And I was like, yeah, usually I can, like, you know, flow into it, but this time, I was not fully there. And it makes a big difference if you wait till you're like wet and dripping and excited and like your body feels it and it's turned on and it's more sensitive and it's inflamed or enlarged, and it matters. So learning that.
It's engorged.
Yeah,
inflamed is a whole other
thing.
Okay,
we're not inflamed. We're not on fire.
That.
That's not going on down there. Okay, engorged.
And what's interesting too is it's the same type of erectile tissues as the cock. Yeah, so we got little boners.
We have little boners in our clits.
Little lady boners,
Little lady boners. I love that. Podcasting gives me a lady boner. So
I have a lady boner right now too. I know.
I know. You were like, oh, my lovers, and that sounds all juicy. Do you have any fun things coming up? Like for the holidays? Also, before I get into that, are you poly, or how do you identify if you're open to sharing?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I would say that I'm more fluid in relationships. I'm probably more on the poly spectrum. I'm not monogamous.
Yeah.
So I've had partners where it's, been more open. I've had partners where it was less so, but there was still play. There's been play I've probably been non-traditional for a decade. I would say almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And I will not go back to strict monogamy. That's just not in my flow. But
yeah.
I've definitely had periods where I was in love with multiple people, in full relationships, men, women, non-binary. I'm just like, it's very fluid.
Fluid. I like it.
Yeah.
Where do you meet these people? Is it in person? Do you do the apps?
I don't do apps.
I don't either. So I was like so curious.
I have had periods of my life where I did do the apps, but
successfully?
No.
No,
never. Not once. Literally, I don't think I've ever gone past a single date, like a first date on any of those.
I think I've had a friend. So I've had a couple success-ish.
Yeah.
Not like full-blown relationships. Yeah. I've had like a friends with benefits friend. I think that's about it. I think that's the closest.
And so for me, it's more of, I don't need a relationship. Mm-hmm. I'm so fulfilled with things in my life. So it's always in person. It's always in the flow. It's always in the path that I'm already naturally doing. And I don't personally believe that I need to do anything extra. Now, everybody's different.
I agree.
Do whatever works for you. But
the more in tune you are with your life and your passions, and you just love your life, you're radiating, you're going to attract somebody, and you can attract them anywhere. It could be at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. I've attracted men when I lived in Utah. When I just visited Vegas, I met a guy and we ended up dating in the future for like 6 months before I moved to California. Yeah. So you can meet somebody anywhere, and it's just that like potency of magnetism that it's just the energy. It's like you're attracting it when you're in that mode, and it's kind of like that self-love. It sounds like fluffy and blah, 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 but when you're in that mode, when you're not searching, it comes to you.
Totally. And it is magnetic when you see somebody in their natural flow.
Yeah.
Your nervous system is calmer, you're more vibrant. If you're doing something that you love versus something that's based out of a strategy, I'm doing this to get this person or to get this thing, it doesn't give you that same vibrancy that you would if like somebody sees me on, whether it's on stage or I'm teaching or I'm rope tying somebody. Like, it's really hot to watch me do these because I'm in my element.
Yeah.
And that's hot.
It is hot.
Or I'm giggling with my girlfriends. I'm having the best fucking time. I'm laughing so hard, and that is attractive.
And then people will just see you and just be like, wait, I want to talk to that woman. Not the one that's like, I have to find a guy. I'm searching. Then they're stressed. They're not having fun. They're not in their element, and they're not being themselves. So yes, I love that we talked about this. So true. Okay, where have you met some of your partners now or in the past?
Oh, man. I mean, most of the time it's at community events. I've had people who were following my work for a while and then met them in some community or through friends. It's usually through friends that I'm meeting somebody because there's like this extra level of relaxation. Yeah. And then meeting how these, some of my work has supported them through hard times or through breakups and stuff like that. And so that's an interesting, I kind of think of it as this, I'm energetically meeting them long before I physically meet them.
Ooh, yeah.
So I would say things like that. Also, workshops, like I love BDSM, I love kink workshops, I love stuff like that. So like meeting like-minded people in there. And also I'm total nerd. So at these conferences, I speak at conferences and so getting to know people who who are change makers and doing things in the world, that's like really attractive to me to watch. You know, people moving and shaking and
what are
creating.
some conferences that you like?
Mind Valley is a good one.
Okay.
Yeah. That one's just like all these people who are connected to conscious awareness, self-development, growing, spirituality, but also are fun.
Yeah, and conscious and fun.
Yeah. Summit is another really good one. Yeah.
Summit, okay.
Summit, yeah.
Nice, okay. So people listening that want to find a boo, but maybe your town is small, get out, go to conferences. You never know what could happen. Go to things that you're excited about. You may meet people, and you never know what could change your life. You never know.
It is. And that's the thing is like, do the things that you fucking love. Like, what are your passions? What are your interests? And if you're like, I don't have any passions, what I usually tell people and tell my students is, if you're following, like, what are the things that spark interest and curiosity? Like, what podcasts do you tend to be drawn to? Or what do you tend to read about? Or what do you, what has percolated in your mind, but you've never allowed yourself to go down that path because you believe that you can't, or that's too big for you, or whatever it is. Follow it. Just
try.
Follow it.
That's how you find your passion, your purpose, is just going down that crazy spiral loop. It's not like, oh, I just already knew that I was going to be a sex coach. No, it was like I became a marketing coach, and then I did all these little baby steps, and then I found I love sex coaching and talking about sex and teaching. So yes, it's about following those little interests and sensations and desires. Even if they're small and they go away, it's okay.
And not based out of this, I'm going to be interested in these things to get somebody.
Yeah.
Like some of my interests, like people are shocked to hear some of my little Dr. Cad secret little, interests. Because I'm like, I love anime. You know, I play Magic the Gathering cards.
Oh,
like, I really,
nice.
Like I have all these little isms that are out there that I'm interested in, not because of anybody else, but because of these little they're not even like secrets, but things that people wouldn't assume when they find out, and that happens to be something that they're really into, but nobody else knows. It's like enlivening. It's like, oh fuck yeah, you like that anime too. Like we can geek out together, and it's like an orgasm.
Oh, I love that.
Nerdy possibilities. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then you also said you do shibari and BDSM. So what kind of, is there events around that? If people are intrigued, what can they dive into? I know I've had dominatrixes on the podcast, but
great.
Yeah.
So I have some online courses, both pre-recorded, and then I also do live courses. I teach tantric BDSM, so several different practices of embodying the dominant energy, the submissive energy, role play, rope tying, using impact toys, tools, dirty talk, how to do dirty talk. My upcoming live course for femme and women identifying is big cat energy. So it's learning how to embody bigness, how to have sex on top. You know, that's a very vulnerable place for many women to be. It's like they don't know what to do when they're on top. You know, and like, how do you hold confidence and dominance, or how do you hold this sex kitten submissive energy, or how do you, seduce? And things like that. So I do those all online, but then I also have a live retreat coming up in Malibu called Exhale, and it's using ketamine assisted group therapy and sensuality for women.
Just women.
Just women.
Ooh, is it also a play party at the end? Okay, no. But just more therapy and growing and...
Therapy, but it's sensual.
Okay.
Like we bring it into the body. We move the body. We learn how to develop a relationship with the body, and the nuances and the subtleties.
Dancing,
and like, and drum journeys. And like I bring in a whole energetic ceremonial perspective to it, but it's also like the sensual, sexy, like let's feel into our body's experience, which is so important as a way to heal ourselves, touching on that erotic power, that sensual power, that just, if having that right relationship with the body, the enjoyment of being in the body will change everything, change all aspects of your life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, if you would like to leave us with, I don't know, maybe some dirty talk. I would love to share, but you don't have, I'm putting you on the spot, so you don't have to. You could also just share a couple tips for dirty talk.
Oh, you are putting me on the spot. And I love how well you've paid such good attention to me today and asking me all the right questions and making me feel like such a good guest on your show. I'm already feeling all kinds of tingles in my body. I'm feeling a little wet in my body. And while I'm holding this very phallic-shaped microphone, I just want to thank you so much for bringing me on the show.
Oh my God. Well, I just got wet too. Ooh, okay. Well, before I blush too hard, where can they find you and get more of you?
So they can find me at sexloveyoga.com. They can also tune into my podcast at Sex Love Psychedelics, or find me on Instagram, as long as I'm still up and I'm not censored and taken down, at Dr. Kat Meyer. That's DrCatMeyer.
Oh, yay. Well, thank you so much for coming on and making me excited too.
My pleasure.